Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting. And we're going to call our meeting to order. Any declaration of interest, general nature thereof from council? There being none. Delegations, presentations. We have Forbes Brothers Powerline Construction. And Sean Forbes is, yep. If you'd like to come forward up here to the comfy seats. And you're going to be, you've got two tower presentations. I guess one's on Division Street North and the second one's on County Road 45. Okay.
Sean, which one do you use?
Division Street. Yeah, Division Street.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. Thanks for having me here and setting this up. As the introduction alluded to, I am here on behalf of Freedom Mobile. I come from a company called Forbes Brothers. The confusion a little bit there with the power line is Forbes Brothers is a power line construction company, well, infrastructure company in general. And today we're here in capacity as agent for Freedom Mobile in real estate acquisition and municipal approval process for some new towers. A quick background just on Freedom Mobile. They are, for anyone who does not know, emerging as Canada's fourth national telecommunications carrier. That would be among the incumbents, Bell, Rogers, TELUS, those types of companies. At present, they operate in most of our major cities, so Toronto, Edmonton, Vancouver, Ottawa, all these areas. Outside those areas, not so much, but they are expanding. Currently, I think they have about just over 1 million customers, about 1.2 million. And one of the biggest benefits we get asked about Freedom Mobile, because most people already have a phone, they already use one of the incumbent carriers, has to do with the price and the offerings that they bring with them. That doesn't mean you have to switch to Freedom Mobile, and this is not a sales presentation for Freedom, but the benefit that comes with it is most of the incumbents end up lowering their prices in the markets that they operate. So that's something that sort of comes with the territory of more competition. And like I said, I'm from Forbes. We are an infrastructure company, and we are acting as agents for Freedom Mobile. So specifically why we're here is Freedom is in the process of expanding into new licensed markets. So as I said, they operate in the GTA area, and presently this project, they're expanding from Toronto East through Cornwall and then up into the Ottawa Valley in the Pembroke area. Part of this project is the Cobourg area market, which is why we're here today, for two new tower sites they have in your township. These two would be among 41 new tower sites they have, sort of following this 401 corridor east. So specifically, the site I'm talking about first has the site code OCO3403. You can see there it's proposed at 2636 Division Street North. And the purpose of this site would be to provide coverage along Burnham Street, Dale Road, Baltimore Road, the 401, and the surrounding area. To give you an idea of what that looks like in operation, the purple area there is your dense sort of in-building coverage, they refer to it as, or their optimal coverage, which just means if you had a Freedom device in that area, it'll work inside, outside, in a car, in a basement, anything of that nature. The orange area is more of their variable coverage, so most likely outdoors it'll work. It'll work if you're traveling, that you'll hand off to the next site, but it may not work if you're, say, behind heavy cover of some kind, cement walls, things like that. Specifically, to show you a detailed view of the location, this is the property at 2636 Division Road, or Division Street, sorry. This is about 850 meters southwest of Dale Road and Division Street North intersection. It has its own marginal agriculture, and again, a little more detail there. This is a view of where the compound's actually going. So it's set towards the northwest corner of the property, built into a little nook in the tree line there. It'll use the existing access off Division Street, so there's no new access coming. And it's set back about 317 meters from the roadway on the tree line. Let's see if there's anything else. And then to the north, it's set back about 9 meters south from the northern property line. To give you an idea of what's proposed here, Freedom has proposed a 45-meter monopole structure in a 10-meter by 10-meter fence compound. The monopole is essentially just singular steel tubes stacked on top of each other with the antenna equipment mounted to the top of the tower. There's also a radio equipment cabinet put in place. It's 1.8 by 2.4 meters and about 2 meters in height. It's prefabricated, so it's just dropped on top of a concrete pad. And then the compound area has a locked gate to prevent anyone from accessing the site who should not be in there. The height of the pole itself at 45 meters, the purpose is to provide the coverage I was showing in the previous slides. The height allows it to reach over top of trees, buildings, variations in the topography, things of that nature. To give you a better idea of what we're talking about here, it's a simulated image. This is taken from beside the existing building on the property, facing west. So that is roughly what it would look like if you were on the property. Sort of the process we're following here, for anyone who is not aware, telecommunications is federally regulated in Canada, which includes the infrastructure. That being said, part of the requirements are we consult with the local land use authority, which is the Township of Hamilton in this case, and within those requirements to consult with the municipality, we also consult with the public, which is what we are facilitating right now. So in addition to this meeting, we had mailed notifications that went out sort of mid-October, October 19th, I believe the date was. That coincided with a notice in the local newspaper, all of which provide invitation to submit any comments to us, as well as attend this meeting for any questions. And that period requires 30 days, which ends November 23rd. So far for this site, we have only received one question about the service provider who will be on this tower, which is Freedom Mobile, and we'll see if any more questions come in today. Outside of the requirements to consult with the municipality and the public, the federal government also sets some general requirements, which sometimes we get questions about, which are aviation safety. So we make applications to Transport Canada, NAV Canada to make sure we're not interfering with anything. There's also some safety codes we have to apply to or be in compliance with, as well as make sure we're not interfering with any existing radio communication devices in the area. So we can't interfere with other electronic devices, essentially. Outside of that, we have the public consultation, as I said, and more or less we are here to answer any questions that come up from either council or the public.
Just so you know, this isn't it's not a public meeting, this meeting, it's a committee of the whole meeting, so it'd be just questions by council members.
Sure.
Are you not having a public meeting?
Well, when we asked where and when to have the public meeting, they said to come to committee of the whole.
Okay, that's for council though, so then you'd have a public meeting, would be just yourselves dealing with the public and their comments.
So that is what we requested to do, and they said committee of the whole. I said normally we host these at a separate time, date, on our own. People can show up. I was told to come here.
Who would have told you?
Between planning and speaking with Kate Cirrus.
You mentioned that, Kate?
Based on what was in the newspaper, this was
Oh,
this
so,
was a public meeting.
yeah, but it's not a public meeting. That's what I'm trying to make clear here so that you're aware of it.
Following the last communication tower proposals where they went and had their public meetings but never notified the municipality they were holding the meetings, and then it came to council's attention through a private landowner that these were being proposed and the public meetings were held and council didn't receive notification, and because we don't have a protocol in place, that we thought that a committee of the whole would be able to hold their information session. So it's not really a public meeting, it's an information. Is it a...
Well, so my understanding was that we would provide the presentation, open up to any questions for council members, and then open up to questions for anyone who came from the public.
And that's what gets us a little bit of problem, because it's not really an official public meeting. It's not our meeting, because that meeting would be held by yourself and so forth. So you'd have to have your own location and have that public meeting so that you'll get comments from the public that wish to give comments, and obviously there is some here today that I think, unfortunately, are here thinking that they were going to be able to speak, and because it is a committee of the whole, and we are limited on time, that we can't just open it up for comments from the public. And I don't want the public to think that we know anything about it, because it is federally regulated, so it's not our meeting. This committee of the whole is, but his meeting, the meeting that you'll have to have for the public, is for them to have for the public. So it's different than today's meeting. So you're going to have to, I would suggest that since you do have members of the public, that there's about 3 or 4 here, perhaps you can meet with them after we're done our committee of the whole meeting outside the offices, or perhaps you could use the side room here that's right next door. It's not being used today, so we could let you use that with the 3 or 4 members of the public.
Sure, I can do that, yeah.
Okay. So we'll go to committee members. Questions by committee members or council members? Scott, yes?
The location of this tower in relationship to Dale Road is a set distance. I don't know exactly what that is. But interestingly enough, there's already a 400-foot tower north of Dale Road, about the same distance as this one is proposed south. I'd suggest that maybe to be 3/4 of a kilometer, half a kilometer to 3/4.
So if it's the, I don't mean to cut you off, but if it's the town I'm thinking of, there's a Bell site. Its site code is W3267, and it is about 2 kilometers north of Freedom's proposed location.
That I don't know the reference numbers, of course, for any tower, including the 2 you've just spoken of.
I imagine.
However,
that's
I
the
accept that to be reasonable.
Yep.
And I will say that your distance of 3/4 of a kilometer to a kilometer, distance up to 2 kilometers is going to get us to the same site. What I'm really getting at is there's a 400-foot tower there owned by Bell.
Mhm.
And I'm at the point where I step outside at night, which I find to be the most negative visual impact of any tower. Depending on the height, different light requirements. And I'm getting to the point where I've had enough towers in this municipality. I certainly have enough visual for my property, and whether it be a conflict or not, I don't think so, but this one would impact my view as well. What type of lighting would be required on this particular 45-meter tower?
So this tower, we don't believe will require any lighting because of its location. We're not within proximity to any lighted aerodrome, and applications have been made to Transport Canada and Navigation Canada. So that will come back, and prior to receiving a recommendation from council on go ahead, not go ahead, we can have that confirmed for you, what lights will be required, if any. Our current anticipation is no lighting.
So if there's no mandatory lighting,
Mhm.
do tower companies still put lights on towers to protect their own investment?
No, they don't put lights.
So if there's no mandatory, there would be no lights on this tower?
Correct.
Okay. Construction.
Yep.
Monopole construction, I believe you said.
Yep.
Which means it cannot be seen through. Wind does not penetrate through it. It cannot be seen through. I'd be interested in knowing the public's opinion if this tower proceeds. I'd be interested in knowing the public's opinion of the type of structure and which is more visually accepted. For me, it wouldn't be a monopole, by the way, but that's my own personal opinion. The other thing is, do we need this tower? Why not cohabitate on the bell tower? Certainly at 400 feet and space below it, it can do your coverage area.
So we do share these towers quite often. Of the 41 tower sites I have, the total project is more like 100 sites. So a number of those are using existing towers, and a number of them are using rooftop sites. Generally, once you start to get outside of about a kilometer away from the location they're trying to use, they're not going to consider sharing. It's too far away. I know it seems like such a small distance for such big structures, but once you move, this tower 2 kilometers north, just assuming the height is available and what they want, now it's connecting with this tower, the next one over, which is designed to work together so that they have seamless coverage everywhere. If you shift that one, you're creating gaps in the location you intended to cover. So now they're going to want new towers further south to work with the shared site and other new sites in their network.
And you have done an engineering review to establish that?
For this site, it's too far away, so they haven't done it. That's
I'm
something we can...
in disbelief that you cannot get a point on a 400-foot tower that would blast your poor little 45-meter tower out of the ground. And I think that should be reviewed.
Sure, we can add that to it. I'm just saying, so normally, they don't do it for sites that are that far away. That's the only reason it hasn't been completed. At your request, absolutely, we can have it
As
done.
an individual council member, because this is conversation only, that will be one of the components that I would be requesting in the future.
Sure.
That's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Bill?
Thanks, Mark. My question just is in the way that you contact public. Is the distance 3 times the tower height, is that something that's set down by federal agency? Is that
Yeah.
something you just use as a guideline, or what is
So
that?
that is the default process. So industry, well, now it's called Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, which was formerly Industry Canada, who set our requirements, the default requirements. Basically, there are 2 streams you follow. So once you approach the Land Use Authority, the Township of Hamilton in this case, they either have their own policy for dealing with telecommunications. If they do not, you follow the default one, which is set by ISED. Their default policy says 3 times tower height measured from the base of the tower.
In this case, we're only talking 135 meters. Could I ask you how many members of the public actually got notification?
Off the top of my head, for this site, I do not remember. Planning has the information, and I could pull it up probably
4
on my
or
phone.
5, less than 10?
Let's see here. If I go back, the map is a little small. I believe one of them, so we have 2 sites. One of them, I believe, was 7, and the other one was, I think, 14.
Right, so this would be the 7.
Probably, yes.
And that, to me, that's such a small number of the public. Like, the worst thing that happens to us in any of these situations is members of the public come forward after the fact and say, we had questions, we had objections, we didn't know anything about it. And we sit here with egg on our face. I don't think 135 meters is a realistic distance. You can certainly see the tower from farther away than 135 meters.
Yeah. In addition to that, I mean, the notice is placed in the newspaper as well, which gives people a chance to...
The newspapers in our area, we have basically one free one that most people consider is just used to wrap the advertisements in. So I'm not sure how much, it doesn't get enough reading. It doesn't get enough reading.
Right.
It just simply doesn't. I don't know if there's any way you can include more people on your list, but I mean, anyone who's along Division Street area, farther than, I mean, to me, that's only like 3 households north and south, and then across the road. It's not very far. It needs to have more, I think you need more public consultation. And if they have till the 23rd, did you say, to submit questions?
Yeah.
Then wouldn't you have to have your public meeting after that?
So normally what we do is have the public meeting during the public comment time so that anyone who comes to the meeting gets some information. It might bring up additional questions or something that we need to look into and get back to them. So usually we have the comment period extend past when the public meeting is, and obviously there's been a mix-up here because we were told this would facilitate the public input, but obviously that is not the case.
No, I don't believe so, because, I mean, even if you do, as our mayor suggests, we supply you with a setting for the people who did come today, and whether they are or not representative of the entire community, the entire neighborhood is very debatable. I mean, I'm sure there are other people in the area that if they were notified, they may have questions, and I'm not objectively opposed to what you're trying to do. I just think in the scheme of things, we need to be very open about what's happening so that the majority of people are made aware that we don't get the stories that come back later that we didn't know anything about it. That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Sure, yep. This is just, that's what the regulation is, so we go
Yes.
by it. And I believe your township is actually in the process of developing their own local policy.
We are,
So
because
that
this
may-
isn't the first incident we've come across.
Sure, yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Gary, yes?
Yep, just a few questions. Just the first one I want to follow up was on, what is the distance between you mentioned the lighted airdrome? Your distance, what?
Oh, off this one, as long as, so, off the top of my head, I don't know what the closest airport is, but in the applications, basically, you don't have to include any information on the airport if you're outside of 6 kilometers. So there's no airport on this
The
one.
reason I'm concerned is the hospital has an airdrome.
Right.
Okay. Is that outside your distance, or does that fall into the category?
I would have to double check, but again, so these applications go direct to Transport Canada and NAV Canada, and they check against all of them, including the hospitals.
I would suggest that you check that, just to make sure. And first of all, let me say welcome, and I'm glad to see you're here, and I recognize that the mix-up's not really all your fault, it's the township's fault too, that we should have been a little more explicit in detail, okay? Because there should have, unlike the rest, there should have been public meetings, and then hopefully there will be, because you have two sites in here, not one site.
Yep.
So I think you need to look at that. I don't know if all the people are here for both sites or one site, but I strongly recommend with the rest of them that you have a public meeting, because you're probably going to get some questions asked that we're not going to think of. But I must say that I do see the need for more communications in the township. There's a lot of areas still that don't have good communications, and I think, what kind of speeds are we looking at here?
So these would be comparable to any of the networks. So all these new sites are all coming out with their LTE coverage. So your comparable 4G coverage as fast as any other, Rogers, Telus, Bell, the best that they offer.
So
It's
they're
all the same.
capable of getting that off your system?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. As I said, my biggest concern is, you're within I think you're within an airdrome, and I think you need to check that out, but you're here, and I have to agree with them. I just want to emphasize again that you need a public meeting,
Sure.
to solve some of the problems here. And
Okay.
That's all I really have to say.
Okay, yeah, and we'll just reinforce that today is not don't
understand.
consider this a public meeting. This will not be considered a public meeting. If we're signing off on it, we won't be signing this as a public meeting. A couple of questions for you, though. Back to the tower and the lighting and so forth, you mentioned that it may not be any lights. Is that just an assumption, or is that an actual fact that you've already received?
At this point, that's an assumption, but again, we would hold off on any recommendations until those reports come back.
Sure.
So we don't decide the lighting requirement. It's set by Transport Canada.
Because I haven't seen one, even the size, I haven't seen one without lights yet, so I'll be surprised.
We build lots that don't have lights on them.
Is that right?
Generally in the 40-meter range, you're probably okay if you're not near an airport. But again, yes, this is our anticipation of the lighting requirement, not what has been set by Transport Canada.
Okay, good. We better move to our next one then, if you would.
Sure, so-
Just sake of time.
Yep.
Okay,
Well, so the next one, I'll wait until you pull it up. So we can skip some of the intro here. A lot of this is, well, not a lot, it's all the same. The only difference here is this other site is OCO 3407. The address for this one is 4739 County Road 45. The coverage requirement here is similar, but a little bit further east, which looks like that. On the map, the coverage requirement here is County Road 45, Dale Road, 401, and surrounding area. Again, similar to the last site, this provides in-building coverage for a certain range in that area, local to the tower, and then further spread out, you have your variable coverage. The location here is towards the northeast corner of 4739 County Road 45. It is set back from County Road 45, 245 meters east. This location, you can see the compound there. Again, we'll be using existing access to the property to our compound sort of in the northeast corner there. A major difference from this site and the other site is the design. This is designed as a flagpole site. So again, it's a monopole, single steel tube. The difference is they consider this what you would call a shrouded tower. So the equipment is actually located on the inside of the pole rather than the outside, and the whole thing is designed to look like a large flagpole. Give you an idea of what that looks like here. It's a view facing east from County Road 45, and on the right you can see an approximation of what that would look like. Again, same process. Obviously, as we've discovered, this is not a public meeting, but our mail notifications went out to surrounding property owners, notice in the newspaper, and again, this presentation here. Everything else about it is all the same. The process applies the same. All the applications are the same, just different location.
Questions on this one? Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Scott? Yeah.
Who maintains the Canadian flag on the flagpole in Baltimore?
Freedom Mobile does that.
And they do that on an ongoing basis?
So that would be something I would suggest that they are supposed to, but this issue has come up before, and I think in our seeking a recommendation from council, once we get to that point, because it looks like we're going to be having some public meetings still, in our recommendation, what we seek from council is a concurrence or non-concurrence recommendation, which is, did we generally meet the requirements? Does anyone have any major objections? With these, often what we do is add, or not what we do, what council does is add some conditions to this recommendation. One of them, I think, would be upkeep of the flag. I think would be a good condition to add. In addition to that, I know it's come up before, the flag on most of these is sort of permanently mounted at the top. I would suggest a condition that adds that the flag can be moved up and down for days when the flag's at half-mast or something like that. We've had problems with that in the past, so I think these are all good conditions that we could look at adding to any recommendation.
In the situation where these towers do move forward, are we in a position that someone will be making application for building permit and paying development fees?
So building permits do not apply to the federally regulated telecommunications towers. That being said, if it's a matter of, an existing review process that helps council or different departments have a better look at this, at what actually is going on, in addition to paying fees, usually it's not a problem.
I think my fellow council members know why I keep asking that question. The tower itself can be of a different construction, or is the monopole construction mandatory?
No, monopole is not mandatory. So at this specific site, the reason for the design would have been the fact that it's a little bit closer to residential surrounding the area. So they, in their opinion, selected a design that is nicer to look at. Of course, that's up to the individual. It can change from a monopole to steel lattice to whatever. The important part is that whatever is proposed and agreed upon is what we build. So if we get comments that people think, steel lattice that you can see through is nicer to look at than a monopole, I'm sure it wouldn't be a problem.
One last question, and thank you for your presentation, by the way. You are handed the responsibility, your firm is handed the responsibility to seek out property owners, land areas that might work, and make the presentations to the public and to municipal councils. And I'm sure you've had many of those behind you already. Interestingly enough, I must ask, if you suggest to us that something's available to us, a different light package or a different pole package, are you in the position to bind the company, not Forbes Brothers,
Right.
but Freedom Mobile?
I'm not. Sorry.
What's your position here is stated today? Does that bind the company in any way if that's what we agreed to?
No, but so again, what I would say is when we come back for, say, a final recommendation from council, where, say, we've now gone back and done these additional public meetings, we have the input, we have any design changes and whatever requests we have from council or staff departments. Again, I would have that added as a set of conditions for Freedom to sign off on directly.
And do they sign off with us knowing that they've signed off on those?
Absolutely.
And we get a copy of that?
Sure, yeah.
And that becomes legal and binding?
I would have to check how we word that for legal and binding. The reason being, For example, like site plan agreements and things of that nature don't apply to federal undertakings. We have, in the past, with different clients, entered into letter of undertakings with municipalities where they agree, just essentially signing off saying they're going to build it exactly how they've agreed to do it, things of that nature. So far, I've not had.
But there's the opportunity that what you and us agree and understand may not take place at all.
I mean, if they do it incorrectly, I suppose.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bill?
Thanks, Mark. I'm still back to this public consultation business. You're saying that this tower is a little more public. It's a lot more public. This is in one of what's our most populated hamlet in the municipality. There's a lot of houses in the community center area, Oriole Crescent. I'm not sure how long ago, but we had a proposed site at the Baltimore Rec Center, which from that position to where you're proposing, a well-hit 5-iron would probably get there. And there was a great deal of opposition. As a matter of fact, that tower site did not go ahead. And at the public meeting, which was held at the rec center, there was a pretty decent turnout. And I'm assuming that, I know we should never assume, but I'm assuming that this is the site for which you sent out 14 notifications.
Yes, this was the.
And
bigger
again,
one.
I'm suggesting to you that 14 is not enough. There are way more than 14 residences that are going to be affected by this tower. So, just again, to be open about this whole thing, you need to contact more people in that area before we can feel that there is a agreement to go ahead with it.
Bill, to be fair to him, what distance are we looking at? Do you feel would be fair? Because, I mean, it's, I don't want to put him, I mean, he's done his thing on what has been, basically what's been put forward, and we have no protocol at this point. And I know we've looked at a point where we've said we may not go by the base of the tower, we may go by the base of the property or property line to property. So would that be something you think would be?
I think a distance is very difficult to put on this, considering the location of this tower. We've got, the whole Meadowland subdivision, the Ravine Drive subdivision. All of those people are going to be within sight of this tower. I mean, we're talking more than 100 households.
But I just think we have to give him some sort of a guideline today, and I mean, if that's, even putting that guideline of 3 times the tower distance from the base of from the property lines is going to be,
I'm not sure how you set that distance. I don't know if mailing addresses would be more significant than a distance.
That's what we're trying to establish, is how far do you wish him to send, to mail people. I did see the advertisement in the paper, and it was in the paper approximately, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, it would have
a
been
full page,
October 19th.
It was a
I
full
believe.
page ad in the Northumberland News. But people, as you mentioned, don't always see those anymore, so
No.
it's unfortunate.
That's right.
But, to look at a bigger audience, we got to give them some sort of, I don't want them to leave here and say, well, how big, how
Well,
big
I
an
mean,
area
half a
is it?
kilometer is, anyone within half a kilometer is going to be affected by this tower.
So we feel fair with that?
Well, it's a lot better than
Yeah, I know.
3 times the tower height.
From the property lines? That sound fair? Do you think you could do something like that, since this isn't a built-up area? You could work with our staff to get names, and
Notification-wise, I mean, we can do anything.
that would be...
It is pretty much comes from what the regulations are, or if there are modified requests like this one
I
here,
think
we can work that out.
being in the area that it is, and probably our most built-up area in the township, I think at least a half a kilometer would be from the property lines. Sandra, I see your hand up. Is there...
May I speak?
Sure.
Just to remind council that, and maybe the whole, that when a zoning bylaw amendment, subdivision application, or official plan amendment comes forward, the circulation distance is 120 meters, 400 feet from the subject property. So just keep that in your head.
Yeah. Just this is a little bigger. I mean, this is a tower that's much higher than a building, so I think we went a half a kilometer from the property lines. That would be suffice. I think everyone here is pretty good with that. Yeah. I know we can't make a decision here, but I mean, end result is, I think if you use that as a guideline, I think council would look favorable.
And then, thank you. And before I finish, then I also thank you for, being open with us, and appreciate that you are going to attempt to, make some changes for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council members? Gary, yeah?
Just your existing towers that you already have in place, where's the nearest one from?
For Freedom Mobile?
Yes.
None.
None? So that you're just coming here from?
So right now, the way Freedom operates in areas outside of their main markets, like these big cities where they have launched, is they piggyback off the other carriers. So if you used a Freedom Mobile phone in Toronto and you left and you came out this way, the service you would be getting would actually be Rogers, I believe.
Coming off
But you
Rogers?
pay a premium for it, which is not their model, and actually as a condition of their license, they have to build their own network.
Okay.
They have no choice.
And just going back to the public notices, I think it would be, advantageous to look at probably, I'll suggest the Baltimore Arena and maybe a notice up in the arena itself with your impending date, so that way if there are people outside the half a kilometer that, are interested in coming, they would see that notice too.
Yeah, there is a post office there too, yeah, absolutely. Which is good, I mean, and I don't want you to get the wrong idea, nobody from council here is saying no to any of this at this point, because we often hear the cries too that they don't have service, so this is one way they're going to get it. Pat, final question, because we're going to move on to our next presenter.
I was just curious as to whether either of these towers have the capability of piggybacking other services onto them.
So in the future, at present, they're just proposed for Freedom Mobile, but it's quite possible that Bell or whoever else comes into there and says, I want to put one in the same spot, they could accommodate on these towers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming today, and I know there is some public here, if they wish to meet you in the side room there,
Sure.
and by all means, please do so.
I will do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Press, I'm sorry, but we
I just wanted to mention that I could help with public notice, the radio station.
oh, very good, we'll talk to them there in the other, they're going to the other room now, it'd be great for you to have a chat. Very good. Okay, next up, we have Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority, Linda LaLiberty. She's here to talk to us about the budget, the upcoming budget. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Mayor Lufshin and members of council. This is Lawrence.
Just keep it down.
Oh,
You're on now.
okay. I'm not used to it. So, thank you again, Mayor Lufshin and members of council for asking me to present on the 2019 preliminary budget. I've also brought Jessica Mueller with me. She's our hydrogeologist at the Conservation Authority. Just in case there's technical questions, I can answer financial, but if there's technical questions about our programs, I brought her as a resource. So, and I guess this is just a clicky forward, So I'm not going to go into line by line on the budget. I'm going to give you an overview on the budget and just the various departments of our budget, and then I'm going to do some more on the levy and the capital asset levy that we are proposing for 2019. So we have conservation authorities, and our conservation authority has basically 3 funding partners within our budget. We have authority-generated revenues, and those are revenues that the authority will provide, whether they're user fees and sales. It could be through our membership programs. It may be out at the Forest Center, and they provide about 50% of our budget. Municipal levy is made up of 43%, and then the provincial government grants is about 7%. We've gotten $100,462 for the last 20 or so years, and that makes up about 7% of our budget. There are 5 areas of the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority budget. They are the watershed management and health monitoring, environmental advisory services, watershed stewardship, conservation land management, and corporate services. I'll just touch a little bit on each of these areas, just so you understand the programs that are included in those. Included in the watershed management and health monitoring is our flood forecasting and warning system, our watershed plans, our natural hazard and heritage mapping, our GIS, our source water protection programs, as well as our monitoring programs. And in Hamilton Township, those monitoring programs include 2 weather stations, 3 snow courses, 8 water quality sites, 4 gauges, 50 base flow sites, as well as 3 monitoring wells. Our environmental advisory services include our municipal plan input and review, and that includes comments if you were updating your official plan. The Conservation Authority would normally comment on that. It includes services and legal inquiries into our office. The development plan input and review is also part of the environmental advisory services, and that includes subdivisions and official plan amendments, zoning bylaws. Watershed stewardship includes our fisheries services, our stewardship public education programs, our clean water healthy lands, of which Hamilton Township is a partner in that, providing landowner services through the Conservation Authority, our tree planting program, which includes over-the-counter sales as well as our tree planting service itself, and any partnership events that we do under the stewardship banner. Conservation land management includes all of our conservation areas. This is another area within our budget. So we have conservation areas including Balls Mill, which is near Baltimore. It includes the Ganaraska Forest Center. We have over 9,000 students that visit the Ganaraska Forest Center, as well as we deliver our spring water awareness plan. And the schools that come from this area, from Hamilton Township, include Baltimore, Plainville, Camborne, and Dale Road Senior. Under conservation land management, the 11,000-acre Ganaraska Forest is also maintained under this area of the budget. And we have a timber management program. We've recently updated our timber management plan back in 2017, and we have our recreational out in the Ganaraska Forest. As you are aware, the Ganaraska Forest is a multi-use forest, and we have recreational use out there of motorized to non-motorized. Corporate services is a necessary part of the budget. It is our finance and administration services, our board of directors, our marketing and communication, and our IT services fall under this. To put the budget and the levy in perspective, I thought I would show you a watershed map. You can see that we have 7 municipalities in whole or in part. We have a small portion of the Alnwick-Haldeman, of course, Township of Hamilton, Town of Coburg, the municipality of Port Hope, part of the municipality of Clarington. We have a very small portion of the city of Kawartha Lakes. I believe the assessment says there's 64 people. And we have a portion of the township of Cavan Monaghan. So let's talk about the levy. And the levy is what is, we sent our budget out. Our budget process is that we begin looking at our budget in the summer, and then the board will set the guidelines. We prepare the preliminary budget in September and send it out to all of our municipalities with a notice of what the impact on the levy is. The levy vote is then done later towards the end of November. We are required by the CA Act to give 30 days notice. Ganaraska always gives 40, 45, sometimes 60, depending on the dates. And then we move forward on January 1st with the new levy, and we begin talking, or continue talking, not begin, but continue speaking with your staff on the different capital projects that we are proposing. So the budget criteria for 2019 is set forth by the Board of Directors, is that the base levy would be increased by 2.5. At the time, the Consumer Price Index was roughly 2.8. So the base levy, and I will explain to you what a base levy is, because Ganaraska is only one of 3 conservation authorities to have a base levy. The base levy went from $14,221 to $14,577. The general levy increased, proposed by 2.5%. And new this year, the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority completed a capital asset management plan in 2016. And this plan lays out over 460 assets that we have as owners of the Conservation Authority, with the approximate value of close to $11 million. So capital asset management plan, as I'm sure the township is, some municipalities have completed them. I'm sure the township is working on completing theirs. It basically lays out all your assets and says, how are we going to replace them in the future? So that's what our plan called for. And our plan originally called for the fact that we had to set aside just over $191,000 every year. Capital asset management plans, especially in the beginning, are subject to interpretation to best guess. And so when you're guessing the useful life of a truck, of a dam, of a water gauge, it is your best guess. So when we saw 191, we said we better make our best guess a little better, because we can't afford 191,000. So we got it down to $150,088 that the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority has to set aside every year to cover our capital asset reserve. We started that in 2016, 2017, and again in 2018. We took the funds from the general levy. So it meant that we had a shortfall in all of our other program areas because we were taking that money from the general levy. This was explained to the board. The board then decided, never a right time to go out, but this was the year to go out and ask for the shortfall to come into a capital asset levy. So the capital asset management funding, they stated needed to be incorporated into that 2019 levy. Let's talk about the levy formula. I alluded to the fact that we have a base levy. So the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority has a base levy of $14,577 proposed for 2019. This is roughly the value, not quite, but of the board expenses. So it covers the board per diems, the honorariums of the chair, the vice chair, mileage, any board expenses. And it works out to be $2,082.47 per municipality. So it's like a minimum levy. Then we take the rest of the general levy, take that $14,000 off, and we assign the apportionment value of that's given to us by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. This is the apportionment values that we have been given for this year. So you can see, and you can relate this a little bit to that watershed map. So municipality of Clarington, I'm not going to run down all these, you can read these, but 48.2227%. And you can see Township of Hamilton, 11.1763% of the levy. And this is also what the weighted average votes are also when we get to the voting of the levy. This is the apportionments that we follow. So when I mentioned, I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of Hamilton Township. And so going back to 2012, you can see how the total budget in 2012 was just over $3 million. The total levy in those days was $832. Hamilton Township's general levy was $101,000. Capital levy, and that includes some projects, Clean Water, Healthy Lands, and some of the groundwater, at 50,500. That year from 2011, they actually, Hamilton Township actually had a decrease. So again, I'm not going to read all these numbers. You can read these for yourselves. You can see that throughout the years, there actually has been, in some cases, a decrease from one year to the other for total dollars from Hamilton Township. Last year, there was a 5.2 increase. In capital levy, the capital levy went from 45,500 to 52,000. The Clean Water Healthy Land previously had been funded by Hamilton Township to 15,000, and last year it was increased to 20,000. The other municipalities that fund that also contribute 20,000. So Hamilton Township increased theirs, which gave an increase of that 5.2, and those funds all go directly back to the landowners of the Township of Hamilton. This is the 2019 proposed capital asset levy, and this is found in the budget that you all were given a copy of. I wanted to draw your attention to, I'm going to point out the City of Kawartha Lakes down at the bottom. So that 2018 levy, or 2019, let's look at the 2019. We know that the base levy is $2,082 roughly for 2019 proposed. So you can see that if City of Kawartha Lakes didn't have that minimum levy, every board member in our board has the option of being chair. They would be paid the honorarium and expenses. So if City of Kawartha Lakes, if we did not have a minimum levy, City of Kawartha Lakes levy would be roughly maybe $1,000. It wouldn't even cover the expenses of the chair, let alone per diem or any mileage expenses. So that's why Ganaraska has introduced a minimum levy. Now, we didn't introduce it while I've been there since 1984. It was introduced before my time, but that is the reason that it was introduced. So it puts all of our municipalities on that level playing field. So you can see as you look across, and I'll draw your attention to Hamilton Township. So the levy proposed for 2019 is the general levy is $110,359.67. That's a 2.5% increase. And that asset levy, that's that capital asset levy. So that's that $150,088, and it's apportioned out at that 11.17%. And that is the way that the capital asset levy has been apportioned using those numbers provided by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. So a proposed levy of 2019 of $127,133.96. Putting the whole budget in perspective, our whole budget proposed for 2019 is just over $4 million. We have $1.3 million of capital projects. Our total operating budget is $2.7. Out of that, we have authority-generated revenues of $1.548, and the municipal levy of $983, with a capital asset levy of $150,088. And then, of course, our provincial government grant, again, at $100,462, which it's remained for over 20 years. So that is our budget in summary, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions for Linda? Pat, yes?
Would it be possible to go back one screen? I just have a couple of general questions so that I understand. The authority-generated revenues, you work it out at 50%. What happens if you're above or below that figure in reality?
That is just an approximate. Over the last few years, that's where it generally is of our operating grant. It's generally in around 50%.
So if you're over 50%, does it get held aside somewhere, or does it adjust into the next year? Or if you're under, how does it get made up?
Sure, it would be generally how we work it out is of our budget. If it's 50%, then something else is less than that. So it's worked out with the other revenues. That's just a general. But if we ever had a surplus, it gets held over or put, because as you're aware, for instance, with planning fees, if you bank on $36,000 of planning fees. One year you could be at 50, another you could be at 23. So it's
held in reserve.
it's deferred over to the next program area.
Okay, the next question, did I understand correctly that the Ministry of, whatever it is now, with Natural Resources, they give you the apportionments each year?
Yes, they
So is it based on size, population?
They do it for, what they call is, so we will all get a printout, this really fine print, and we're not allowed to hand this out. We all have to sign a sheet. But this is called the current value assessment modified. They have a formula. I can't tell you what that formula is, but it's based on the percentage of the amount of property within our jurisdiction, the population. That's why they've got, City Kawartha Lakes, they've got 62 people that live in our percentage. And then they put it to this formula, and they provide us with the percentages. And this is sent out to all 36 conservation authorities for all of their jurisdiction.
And do you see very much variation year to year, or is it pretty close?
Yes, it can be. Normally what happens is the region of Durham will go up, and that's why some of the other municipalities go down. So as long as region of Durham keeps building, the rest of, actually Northumberland County will decrease, even though there may be increases within your municipalities.
Okay, one last question. The capital asset levy, you're now pulling it out as a separate item.
Yes.
But early in your presentation, you were talking about making up the shortfall. The amount that you have got it set at now, your best guess is that we're going to start building ahead a little bit, or just still barely meeting what we need?
The 150,000, we've pulled that out of the general levy for the last 3 years, and it is in a reserve. It's set up now. And what we're saying is we have this shortfall now because we've pulled it from the general levy. But that 150,000 is our best guess. We are not, the board has asked that that should go up by a percentage every year based on, 2%, maybe not the 2.5, but it should not stay stagnant, because as your assets, as you move forward, building costs go up. So it should go up by 1% or 2%. But again, it's set aside as a reserve. So when we have to buy a truck, or we have to repair a wing wall on Balls Mill Dam, or we have to put, a major capital, we're not coming and asking for money, because we've got this reserve now. As all the municipalities are going towards that, we will not be saying, hey, we need to replace a capital asset. We've got the money. And so that's what you're building. That's why you put 40 years on a dam, or 30 years on a building. We've still set money aside to re-roof that building, and that will come out of the reserve. But we're not coming and asking our municipalities any longer to say, we've got this money, or we've got this need for money. We will now have it.
Okay. Bill?
Thanks, Mark. I had two questions. Linda, you answered the first one already. You have weighted voting.
Yes.
So that's very significant. Thank you. Now, I want to relate how this works to our ratepayers. This 20-year program started in 2016.
Yes.
Yes. So it goes to 2036.
It-
For the first 3 years, there's been no additional burden on the taxpayer. The money has been taken from our regular contribution to your budget.
Correct.
And are we proposing that this year, there's going to be an additional burden on the ratepayer, that $150,000 will be on top of our normal contribution?
Yes,
To
and
make
that, yes,
To make it somewhere in the vicinity of a 12% increase?
if that's what it works out for your, yes.
I'm not
Yes.
great at math, but
Okay.
better than average.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are we looking at that also then for the remaining 17 years of this plan, that there's going to be in the vicinity of a 12% increase to ratepayers?
No, because then it would be set at that, and then moving forward, I'm not sure where maybe I misguided in saying this was a 20-year plan. It's for, it could be 20 years. It could be, But that being said, once this increase would be forward, then that would be the capital asset levy. Then next year, it would be just a 1% increase on that. So that 150 is set. Is what you're asking, it would become part of your base.
Right, so it is an addition.
It
would
is.
be an additional for the remainder of the,
To help with that capital asset
right.
reserve. Yes, absolutely.
Basically, it's a 12% or whatever percentage increase.
Overall.
It's a one-time shot, and then from then on, it's 2%.
15.58.
Yeah.
It's 2% from then on.
Yeah, but that 150,000 is going to be put on the base and continue to stay on the base for 17 years.
That's correct. It doesn't
Which is
go
$3
on, it won't be
million.
added on again next year and year after and after that. It'll be just,
New level of pain.
that's,
Right.
that's right, yeah. Gary?
Yeah, Linda, I just, about 4 quick questions. Can you just explain the difference to me between the capital asset management plan funding and in your budget line that says the capital asset replacement?
They are, so the capital asset management funding is where I've got a line in there that says capital asset management replacement. That is where we're putting money in to, that's where we're taking it out of. We were taking it out of general levy. You'll notice that our general, or the levy now adds up to the 983 plus 150. So that's where you can see all through the budget that we're assigning those that capital asset management funds into the different categories, because it may be, if it's flood warning, it may be gauges and recreational dams.
But they're in there now.
They're in there now. They have been
And
since
what we're looking-
2016.
And what we're looking for is extra just for the contents of the buildings and stuff in the future.
No, they've been in there for 3 years, and we've covered it from the levy. What if you look at that now, that levy, at the bottom levy goes from, as I said, the general levy is at 983, but we've added in that 150 into your summary page. So they're in there now. They have been for 3 years, but now we're asking for them to be funded from our municipalities.
Okay, because I just look at your actual budget that you put in here for corporate services, and I have a couple questions. One was on the capital asset replacement. In 2018, you budgeted 53, and I see that you're looking to 82, and for 82,000 for 2019. And I'm curious to know why the increase, and then that's on top of, your asset management?
Sure. Yes, and that does not affect, we have to replace our furnace. So we're going to take the money out of our capital asset management. We've had to replace a furnace for about 3 years now. So that's one of those things where we're not going out to our municipalities and saying, hey, we need $40,000 or 30 whatever $1,000. The 48.9, where you see other funds, will come out of our capital asset management plan. It's like in 2018, that capital asset replacement, we budgeted probably to get computers or to get a new server, and we took $20,000 out of our capital asset management to do that with.
Okay.
So that's how we're paying for all those capital assets now.
Okay. I think I'm probably used to seeing our way where there'd be a paper on this why, and we'd know why. Just a few more questions, if you don't mind. Compensation plan, you went from 0 to 15,000.
We are proposing, we're going to be proposing, a lot of conservation authorities do a compensation plan about every 5 years. We haven't done one since 2007. So it was recommended to us through an HR group that we look at a compensation plan. When you're training, when you're losing your employees and they're driving up the road, you're retraining. We've had quite a staff turnover this year. And so we're looking at introducing a compensation plan that we would bring towards the board.
Good, okay. And I think you've sort of touched upon office maintenance in there. That was the one, I don't need to go back into that. You explained that. The other one I do have, though, is I'm curious to know, and it's probably just the cost of what it is today, your IM system, your wages, I see it went up 5,000, almost 20%. Is that just?
That's because we're going to be introducing a newer system this year, so we need just for 1 year, a blip in resources from, what we normally do is we get those resources from a neighboring conservation authority, so we're not paying a consultant. We get the bigger bang for our buck where we're sharing staff. So we'll get that resource from Central Lake Ontario and Oshawa.
Okay, thank you. I guess, I'm not sure whether there was some funding left over possibly from last year from our portion that we.
Clean Water Health.
Clean Water
Yeah.
Health, I'm wondering, will that be applicable to our debt, do you think?
That's how we account for it, and this is totally up to your council. How we account for it, that's being accounted for and deferred. If you go to where we report on the Clean Water Healthy Land, and that would be on page 13, you'll see that we have $58,000 deferred there. 8,000 of that roughly is Hamilton
Township's
Township's.
money.
In that, so a couple of reasons, we normally don't have that much deferred, but because our stewardship coordinator was on maternity leave, we had an excellent